Let's be honest. You already know what's destroying your peace. You've known for a while. But instead of confronting it, you distract yourself. You scroll, you chase, you overthink. You drown your intuition beneath noise that feels productive but isn't. And at night, when everything finally goes quiet, the truth starts whispering again. That tiny voice saying, "This isn't how I'm supposed to live." You silence it, hoping it'll disappear. But it doesn't. It just waits. Because here's the thing. You can't hide from yourself. You can only delay the moment you're forced to face who you've become. We often think the world is our problem. Other people, bad luck, unfair circumstances. But what if the real enemy has been quietly living inside us all along? You see, most of us live our entire lives reacting to emotions, to fears, to desires we don't fully understand. We say we want peace, but we cling to chaos because chaos feels familiar. It's not that we can't change. It's that we're terrified of what might be left when the noise stops. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." He was right. We avoid silence because silence introduces us to our reflection, the version of us that knows the truth. And the truth is uncomfortable. It asks too many questions. It forces us to see that most of what we call personality is actually just defense mechanisms we built to survive pain. Have you ever noticed that your biggest battles happen when nothing's happening? When the room is still, when no one's texting, when your playlist ends? That's when the real war begins. Because the silence doesn't just reveal who you are, it reveals who you've been avoiding. That's the moment your mind starts whispering, "Why do I keep repeating the same mistakes? Why do I attract the same kind of pain? Why can't I stop sabotaging things that bring me peace?" Most people run from that moment. They reach for their phone or food or someone to talk to. But the few who stay, who dare to face it, find something extraordinary: clarity. Nietzsche once said, "Man is something that must be overcome." But he didn't mean overcome by ambition or strength. He meant by self-awareness. You don't conquer the world until you've conquered your own impulses. The tragedy is that most never try. Somewhere in your past, you learned that survival mattered more than peace. Maybe you grew up needing to be perfect. Maybe you were told your feelings were too much. Maybe you learned to earn love instead of receiving it freely. And so you adapted. You built walls, masks, and habits that once protected you, but now they imprison you. You tell yourself you're busy. You call it hustle. But deep down, it's avoidance. You're running from the stillness where healing could actually begin. It's funny, we call it progress when we fill every second with activity. But maybe progress is learning how to be still without falling apart. Plato once warned that the unexamined life is not worth living. But today, we live the overstimulated life, endlessly moving, rarely examining, always chasing meaning in everything but ourselves. We've traded reflection for reaction, wisdom for distraction. And the result? A generation of souls that feel everything, yet understand nothing. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Even your self-improvement might be another form of avoidance. You chase habits, routines, and productivity as if you could fix yourself into worthiness. You read philosophy, spirituality, psychology, not to understand life, but to feel in control of it. You become obsessed with growth, yet you're still empty. Why? Because healing isn't about becoming more, it's about becoming less. Less pretending, less performing, less noise. Sometimes peace doesn't come when you improve, it comes when you stop resisting what is. As Bonhoeffer said, the pursuit of meaning without surrender becomes self-worship. And self-worship always collapses because the self is not meant to be your God. Think about it. Almost everything you're anxious about involves control. What people think of you, how the future unfolds, how to fix everything before it breaks. But control is an illusion. It's how fear disguises itself as order. Machiavelli once wrote that it is better to be feared than loved. But that logic only works in politics, not in the soul. Inside, fear poisons everything it touches. You can't control life and love it at the same time. One requires surrender, the other demands domination. And that's the paradox of peace. You only find it when you stop chasing it. We live in a time when silence feels like failure. You can't wait in line without checking something. You can't sit alone without background noise. Even meditation has become gamified, another box to check. But ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly still? No music, no scrolling, just you, your breath, and your thoughts. You'd think that would feel peaceful, right? But for most people, it feels unbearable. Because silence introduces you to your real self, and most of us have been strangers to that person for so long, we mistake them for an enemy. So we keep adding noise, forgetting that healing doesn't come from doing more. It comes from undoing what never belonged. Here's the secret philosophers knew. The pause between thoughts is where truth lives. The Stoics practiced this every day. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful than your own soul." Imagine that. The ruler of Rome, surrounded by war and politics, believing that true peace was internal. If he could find stillness in chaos, why can't we? Because we keep looking outward when the real revolution happens inward. The mind is not your enemy. It's your untrained ally. It's waiting for you to stop feeding it garbage long enough for it to remember how to listen. Every person eventually reaches a moment, a breaking point, where distraction no longer works. You wake up one day and realize the noise you used to hide behind has become unbearable. You start questioning everything. Your job, your relationships, your beliefs, even your identity starts to feel like a costume. That's the beginning of awakening, not the bliss you see online, but the collapse that comes before rebirth. Nietzsche called it the death of God, not about religion, but the death of illusions, the moment when all your comforting beliefs crumble and you're left alone with nothing but truth. And it's terrifying. But it's also sacred, because only when the false gods fall can you meet the real one, within. So where do you go from here? How do you reclaim peace when the world thrives on stealing it? You return to simplicity, to silence, to presence. You sit with your thoughts, not to fight them, but to understand them. You learn to pause before reacting. You learn that not every urge deserves a response. You begin to build a new kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. And slowly, peace doesn't feel like something to chase anymore. It feels like something you remembered, because peace was never lost. It was only buried beneath everything you thought you had to be. At the end of the day, the hardest battle is not against the world, it's against the version of yourself that prefers comfort over truth. But truth has a way of winning. It waits patiently. It watches you suffer through the same cycles until one day you whisper, "Enough." And that whisper is the sound of your awakening. From there, everything begins to change, not dramatically, but quietly. The way morning light slowly fills a dark room, you start noticing peace in small things. A breath, a pause, a moment that doesn't demand anything from you. You begin to live again, not as a machine chasing validation, but as a soul remembering its own rhythm. And that, my friend, is the beginning of real freedom. Because in the end, peace isn't found in perfection, but in the courage to sit with yourself until you no longer need to escape.